Upcoming episodes on the Flying Monkey podcast. Country music artist Grant Malloy Smith. 3-time Grammy Award winner Ricky Cage. Actor-musician, the one and only Chris Mulkey. Father's rights advocate Robert Garza. And new episodes of Parent Stories. Go to flyingmonkeypodcast.com and select your favorite social media site to join us. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Rumble. And don't forget to check out our sponsors, Open Darkness and Stop the Abuse. You can find more information at www.hopeindarkness.info, a common sense solution to parental alienation. Let us help you get your kids back. And www.StoptheAbuse.info. It's time for change. Together, we can stop the abuse. You're watching the Flying Monkey Podcast. We're back, and it's another episode of the Flying Monkey Podcast. And today we have with us a grandmother and mother. Her name is Katherine, and she's here to tell us a little about what she's been through with, I guess it's CPS and family courts and all kinds of every angle of the thing. She's quite experienced and been through quite a lot. So, how you doing today, Katherine?
I'm doing all right. Thank you for
Good.
having me.
Yeah, no, thanks for coming on.
You know, I'm an activist and an advocate. If they're one and the same, but a lot of people are not aware of the broken family court system, the broken juvenile dependency system, or the probate system. I work with thousands of victims, whether it be family court, the probate court, or the juvenile dependency court. And what we're finding in our research is that a lot of these courts are corrupted because of federal funding.
Yeah.
So what got me involved is that my daughter was sick with addiction, and she was homeless. She was 23 years old. She called me and told me she was pregnant. And my heart sunk. And because I was a federal employee, I had excellent insurance. And Obama was in office. He changed the insurance to where you could keep your children insured till the age of 26. So she was only 23 at the time. I raised her in the church. I knew she would not have an abortion. So the conversation started, well, what are you going to do? I'm going to have it, Mom. Well, but you're sick. Mom, I'm gonna go inpatient. I'm gonna get help. Okay. Well, you need to start your OBGYN, get your prenatal, etc. Okay, Mom. That day she came and got the insurance card. She was happy. I was happy, but I was scared because I didn't have faith that she would go to an inpatient. So long story short, she does start going to the OBGYN, but it's 3 weeks out after giving her the insurance card, and I'm getting the statements, and I see that she's going to an OBGYN and knew his name. But like I said, 2 to 3 weeks had already went by, and I was so concerned about the fetus. I mean, I'm concerned about my daughter too, but obviously this baby has no choice. And so then I called my daughter and I said, why aren't you in an inpatient yet? Well, they tell me to keep calling every day. So what they have to do is call in every day. If there's a bed, they get them in. If there isn't, they just keep telling them to call back. So eventually she gets into one. And, but I had called the doctor because I was concerned of the fact of the drugs that this fetus was being exposed to, and whether or not the doctor was informed. And so I called and I spoke to his nurse, and she said that she would bring it up to the doctor and they would see what they could do. Um, the minute that the doctor questioned about the drug use, she never went back. And she also left the drug uh, facility and went back to living in cars and tents. So I then tried to get conservatorship. I called CPS and begged them to help me. They said they couldn't help me because he wasn't born yet. And my daughter was on probation. So I went to my chief of police in county, and I asked if they could arrest her because she was on probation. And he says, if they see her under the influence, they can, but I can't guarantee you anything. Well, I said, thank you, you know. And then fortunately, I got a investigative reporter out of Monterey County, Brooke Holmquist, who did an investigative report. I have the YouTube video of the entire report and the investigation. We went all the way up to the Sacramento State Capitol trying to legislate a bill that they have in Florida. It's called the Marchman Act, where I would have been able to gain a conservatorship over her and either order her to jail or rehab, her choice, until the baby was born safe.
Yeah.
But the Assemblyman Monning told me it would take at least 3 years to legislate a bill. So I just came back and started doing my uh, activism here in the town where she was living in the homeless community, um, going up and showing her picture and saying, please don't sell this girl. I was just out of my head trying to save my grandson and my daughter. So long story short, he's born addicted to heroin, crack, marijuana, everything on the street. Uh, I go in to see him because she called me, mommy's born. They kept her in the hospital. Uh, Went to see him. We pulled in the hospital social worker because she had already addressed the issue that he was born addicted. And so the father, the mother, and myself met with the hospital social worker, and the parents surrendered him to my custody. In other words, you know, we understand you're a mandated reporter. We understand you have to make a report um, of child neglect, but here's my mother, and we want her to raise our son because we don't know if we'll be better by then.
Yeah.
So, you know, this is the prearrangement. I agreed to it, and she took down a no. And so what happened is my daughter ended up periodically going in and out of rehab, going in and out of rehab. I was consistent. I was staying with my grandson because that was what was most important. I was no longer going to worry about what my daughter was doing because I had a baby to protect and see and bond with and love. Oh boy,
Yeah. It's
he
very
was
hard
this
to go through.
beautiful. He was this beautiful little baby. He had the biggest brown eyes, and his name was Angel. I had to deal with him having seizures and what the doctors and nurses did because I had full legal access to talk to the doctors, to talk to the nurses, to go in and out at any given time because the parents gave me that consent. Otherwise, I wouldn't have even been able to be in there because he was on what's called a hospital hold. He had an ankle bracelet. That hospital had security 24/7 to where the NIC unit, which is the intensive care unit for infants, you had to have a key to be let in and out
Yeah.
to protect those babies. So on the daily basis, I was with him so I could go in early and spend more time with him bonding. And then, of course, met his physical therapist, and I started doing his physical therapy because his little hands would go like this and he would have seizures and stomach cramping. And I would have to rub his little body and massage and do all the things the physical therapist taught me. And I would watch the charts because they would dose him with morphine. And I could see that the morphine was going lower and lower and lower. And he was having less and less, um, of- you know, um,
Reaction.
withdrawals, withdrawals. And I dealt with probably 10 to 15 different doctors because shift changes. I dealt with 20 to 25 different nurses because of shift changes. So he's there a month. I could tell he's about ready to go home. And that's when the worst thing happened. And CPS came to the hospital. And they do what is called and these are only in juvenile dependency cases. This is every case works different, whether family law or probate. So in juvenile dependency, CPS will come in and they do what's called a team decision making meeting. Keeping in mind, I called them before he was born. They wouldn't help me. Keeping in mind, I told the hospital social worker and the parents in California, they have a safe surrender law. They surrendered him to me. That social worker still called CPS. I understand mandated reporter by law, she had to.
Yeah.
So they come in and they start discussing about this plan about Angel's future and where he's going to live. And I am a paralegal by trade. I have a degree. That was long before my career with Social Security. I worked for law firms and did civil litigation. So thank God I had, some paralegal studies under my belt. And
Yeah.
my father was a huge patriot. I knew the Constitution. Um, I immediately discerned something not right. And I said, wait a minute, we don't need to have this discussion because he's coming home with me. I'm his maternal grandmother. I'm going to raise him. Ma'am, if you don't be quiet, we're going to make you leave the room. I took a breath back, bit my tongue. I was a little offended. I wasn't
Mhm.
being rude. I wasn't being harsh. Then the next question, I said, how come there's no attorneys? The supervising social worker said, we're not at that point yet, Cap. I said, oh, okay, but we're talking about allegations against the mom. And I thought she should be afforded an attorney. And so we went past that. Um, and then they started laying out some evidence or what they were saying was evidence of mistreatment of the child. Well, we all knew the evidence was clear and convincing. He was born addicted,
Yep.
but we also knew that the parents had surrendered. Well, that didn't get brought up. So, in other words, the hospital social worker never informed the emergency intake social worker from CPS that grandmother was in alignment to take and care for him for the rest of his life. So the two social workers keep laying out some more what they call evidence. And there was one piece of a statement that it was untrue. And I said, I'm sorry, I cannot continue to allow you to falsify information. Half of the things you guys presented is not true. I've been the one caring for Angel this
Yeah.
entire time, every day. Whatever's been happening with my daughter, that's out of my control. I've been with my grandson. I'm bonded. Ma'am, if you do not be quiet, we're going to make you leave. I said, I tell you what, I'm tired. I'm done with this conversation. He is my grandson. I'm taking him. And if you continue to do what you're doing, I'm going to file a lawsuit. The meeting ended. Within 5 days, I got a letter that they from the social workers of Child Protective Services that they were denying me placement because I threatened a social worker. Not that I threatened to sue the agency and that I was not level-headed.
Hmm.
None of them were psychiatrists. None of them were psychologists. None of them had the ability or the legal authority to diagnose me from a meeting. So a week after that, they got jurisdiction from the court based on their live testimony. I tried to go into the jurisdiction hearing because I had standing. The bailiff told me if I came 5 feet or stepped 4 more feet, he would arrest me. Because I'm a law-abiding citizen, I believed him and I left. Looking back, I wish I would have pushed my way in. And the only reason I say that is because maybe I would have got media attention then. The media doesn't even want to cover these stories. I'm in California. I work with an attorney, a civil rights attorney out of San Diego, California. He's a trial attorney. He is suing this agency in the millions. And there is still no change in policy. We need the policy changed. We don't even have a Miranda right. That means the right to remain silent until our attorney is present. They're violating our constitutional rights,
Yeah.
our civil rights, and they are taking our money from Social Security. Then after I went through this experience with my grandson and then appealing it for 3 years and losing at the high court, I then started doing lengthy research into it. And this is when I found this attorney who's suing them in the millions, and they're all being settled out of court. One of the cases he represented was a mother, and they took away her 2 daughters. When the 2 daughters turned 18, they turned around and sued the agency. And that yielded what is called or known as the federal rights to lie case. It went to the Ninth Circuit in California, a 3-judge panel. And the CPS attorney was trying to argue with that 3-judge panel that it was okay for social workers to lie, which is what they did in my case. They lied to the judge to get my grandson and to deny me. So there's a case right now in the Ninth Circuit where they literally cite an opinion that says social workers do not have a right to lie. Guess what? They're still doing it.
Yeah.
And like I said, anyone out of California, millions, and all you got to do is Google $1 million lawsuits, California CPS. You will see 4 million hits.
Have you been victimized by family court? Are you suffering parental alienation? It's child abuse and it's domestic violence by proxy. Are you stuck drowning in legal and mental health bills? Get off the treadmill, escape the trap. With over 10 years of research, thousands of parent interviews and case studies worldwide, we have developed a system that works to help you get your kids back. Join the movement now. Hopeindarkness.info, StoptheAbuse.info, AlienationAcademy.com, and theflyingmonkeypodcast.com. It's time for change, and it's time to stop the abuse. Go to tinyurl.com/stop-parental-alienation. So they get federal funding to place children into adoption and foster homes. Is that kind of what's
Right.
behind what their
So
motive
the
is?
spin, if they were to have placed him with me, I'm biological
Yep.
and no jurisdiction, they would have never started getting that federal funding. The minute the child's a ward of the court or the state, the federal funding kicks in. So in reality, when they wrote ASPA in 1997, American Safe Family Act, is they essentially incentivized that agency to be corrupt. They get more money to put those children in foster care than they do to not even open a case and let a relative that's passed a background check and a
Interesting.
life scan and a homestead, for which they did neither on me. I mean, I work nationally now with families, and I've read probably almost every policy and procedural manual in the United States, and they are all very consistent across the board. Relative placement first at all cost,
Yeah. That's
but they
insane.
completely bypass it.
Yeah.
So what we need as a body, we need to get to the legislative floor and start making policy changes. I want to see CPS workers wearing body cams like
That would be
cops.
amazing. Yeah, that would be amazing.
I want to see the policy change that parents have the right to an attorney before their kids are yanked out of their own. Some of these cases don't even go to the DA, but yet they're saying the parent criminally abused the child. Well, if the parent criminally abused a child, because we know there are those cases, I am not saying there's not a need to protect children. But in the cases where a child literally had been beat, like Gabriel Fernandez, there's a Netflix series on his story.
Yeah.
He was being beat, and there were marks everywhere.
I
The
know.
DA charged his mother and the stepfather, and they got life in prison. But he suffered for 7 years,
Yeah.
and the DA did nothing. And mostly in all these CPS cases that I work, because that's the majority of what I work, they never their children are gone and adopted, and the parents were never criminally charged with neglect.
Amazing.
So CPS acts like its own law enforcement agency.
Yeah.
That is also how the family court is operating. The judge is supposed to be impartial, non-biased, and fair to each party. At that court date, when the social workers submitted perjured testimony, they were granted jurisdiction of my grandson. Then they came in and they took them. And like I said, they wouldn't allow me into the jurisdiction hearing because they said I wasn't a party to the matter, even though I was the maternal grandmother. And so then I found a document. It's called relative standing. And I filed that in to the lower superior court juvenile dependency. And I went before a judge, and the judge said, "What can I do for you today?" And I said, "Well, did you read my 388, which is a motion to change circumstances or motion to change an order?" And she said, "Yes, I did." I said, "Well," I said, I'm here to let you know that I spent 9 months trying to save this child before he was born, and I was prepared to raise him. The parents surrendered him to me, and the information that the social worker submitted to the court is perjury. I did not threaten a worker. I threatened to sue the agency, and I'm a federal employee with the Social Security Administration of 12 years. If I was not level-headed, I would not be able to do that job. "Well, what would you like the court to do, ma'am?" And I said, "Well, I would like a trial by jury. I would like discovery. I have witnesses, because when CPS talked to the hospital, they only talked to one doctor and they only talked to one nurse. I only ever dealt with those two parties 1 or 2 times at best. I dealt with a lot of other doctors, and he had what was called a physical therapist. And, the other doctors would talk to me about his chart, his progress. But for some reason, they only had that one doctor and that one nurse in that room. So I told the judge, I would like to call my witnesses. I would like to depose the workers and have a trial. And then she went on to say, county council, is there anything you want to say? Who's opposing party? I'm against county council, who represents CPS. And she said, no, not really. I just wanted to say I'm very sorry that you've went through this. And I said, I'm sorry, but I don't feel that you're sorry. Those social workers lied on a piece of paper to deny me. And then the county council starts to talk, and the judge says, I watch her because I'm in in a witness stand right now. And I watch her and she goes like this to the social worker. In other words, you don't need to say anything else. And then the judge looks over at me and she says, Catherine, would you like to have your trial now? And I thought she meant a different kind of a trial. Because remember, I said I would like a trial by
By
jury.
jury.
I want discovery. I want to call in witnesses. I want to do depositions, subpoenas. So I thought she meant some other kind of hearing. And I said, yes, because obviously, if she was talking about the hearing that I said I wanted, she would have known that I would have need time to prepare my interrogatories, the deposition, the subpoenas, etc., and come back at a later date. So being naive, not an attorney, just a paralegal, I said yes. So she went on with the hearing and she said, I'm going to side with the agency. I'm sorry, I'm a grandmother too. I know what you're going through.
It's funny that yeah, does she really? She doesn't know what you're going through because they haven't
She's
taken
retired
the
now.
time. Yeah.
She's retired. So then, because my daughter basically, with the parents, they give them what's called a case plan. And so they had already terminated the parental rights. So my daughter was afforded an appellate attorney, a public defender. Like in the lower juvenile dependency court, she was appointed an attorney. My grandson was appointed an attorney, and the father was appointed an attorney. This is another thing that's been very frustrating for me legally. Is my grandson was 1 month old when they took him. They appointed him an attorney. My information that they had denied me was in that paperwork. If he was working for the best interests of my grandson, don't you think it would have been appropriate for him to call me?
Well, of course. And to
He,
divulge all the information that was known.
he never did.
That seems to be a pattern as well that I've noticed.
Right.
I've experienced it as well.
Yes.
They do not represent the best interest of the child.
Right.
The
We
truth.
have made bar complaints in California, specifically on court appointed attorneys. And the bar is unfortunately just as damaged. That's why nothing is changing, because there's no consequence.
Yeah. Yeah. It's overwhelming and it's amazing. Just to go back to the one thing, like when we're in court and we've been through this, it's so traumatizing to have your child or family member, or in your case, your grandson, taken away from you, and it puts you into you just can't function, you can't think clearly. And, I'm not experienced as an ADA, but I know that that's something that we need to be represented as, because we're suffering trauma and PTSD in that moment in time, and they ask you a certain question, and you could even say yes to a question that the answer is no, but yes still comes out of your mouth. And there's no concern, for it seems to be kind of they manipulate it intentionally to, they know
Mhm.
what they're doing and what's going on, and there's no room for taking a step back and calling a timeout and saying, "Wait a minute, I wanna redo that," or "I
Mhm.
don't want this," or "No, they did do this when I said they didn't, but they did, and here's
Mhm.
evidence." And it's just it's insane because it's so
Yeah,
hard for folks to
and
go
in
through
in
this.
the CPS juvenile detention, um, they can use hearsay. It's
Yeah.
in their
So
WIC
you
codes.
And then when you have actual proof and evidence, they call it hearsay to deny it when it's not hearsay. And yeah, then it goes in the other way. They do it and they get away with it. So yeah, that's another trend that you see in almost every single case that I've seen, heard, and talked to people about. It's
Mhm.
nuts. So as an advocate nationally, what would you like to see changed, and how could people, or what can people do to help make the change?
Well, in juvenile dependency cases, in other words, if CPS comes in, I encourage every single person to go to www.fightcps.com. It is for the average person. There is a document library where you can actually see samples of templates that people can use that have to represent themselves. Because as you just stated, most of these people are appointed public defenders and they are not fighting for the best interest of the child or the
Yeah.
best interest of the parents. In fact, they cause more division. So in that website, she has a docs library. She has what you need to do if your attorney is not working for you. It's called a Marsden motion. I'm not an attorney. I cannot give legal advice, but I can guide you to the place to find what you need and the instructions of how to prepare it. And that's the website.
Okay.
The other thing that I, as an advocate nationally, and that also works with fathers' rights groups, because my daughter's father was not in her life. And it wasn't because I was a hateful ex, it was because he had some of his own uh, issues, such as my daughter's.
Yeah.
Um, but I believe a father plays a very, very important role in the children's life, especially in their youngest years. Sets a foundation. So,
Most definitely.
um, we are, working a lot with fathers because it's very, 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 very apparent in court rulings that 90% of the time they give custody to the mother. 90% of the time the mother lies that the dad hit her, and she's given a, protective restraining order, so the father can't even see the child, and it was all on hearsay. There was no proof that there was abuse, and all of a sudden the father's hands are tied. So I advocate mostly for fathers and fathers' rights. And then in the probate, what's happening in those issues is elderly people end up, going into dementia, and their plan and in their will was that they wanted to stay at home.
Yeah.
Well, what ends up happening in some of those cases is the hospital. They end up going in the hospital and they end up being incubated. And somehow, ironically, they sign these power of attorneys. And then what ends up happening is they are made, uh, the state is made a guardian over their estate. And they still, that person's estate money from the heirs that were entitled to get it when the person literally passed away.
Wow.
So that's what we're experiencing in probate courts is they're stealing the estates. So we have two websites we recommend anyone that's experiencing a bad judge, a bad lawyer, a bad guardian ad litem. In other words, they're ethically violated. Is put their name up. There's a website called www.uglyjudge.com.
Right.
And there's a bigger picture to that, that there's a number of people that are people like us, but they are like engineers and they are building a database where we are going to be able to come in and say, this judge and this many plaintiffs, has this many plaintiffs because of this type of ruling. In other words, we're building.
Yeah.
So
Are the parents are the if you go to that website, are you anonymous?
you can be.
Because I just know some people just by being a normal person, I mean, I know some situations where they mention the judge and then they get repercussions or they get some crazy restraining
They
order.
get a gag order. So
So,
so we have the ugly judge one,
and the
and
other
then there's another one. The other one is called www.therobyroom.com.
so
So I
robing,
encourage, like
robing.com.
robbing, but it's Roby.
Got it.
And again, it's a group of pretty high up people that are tired of,
The
the
shenanigans.
yeah, and they're building a database.
That's awesome. Good, good.
So
Awesome. Well, Catherine, just you're amazing. What you've been through is so tough, and I feel I mean I feel you. I'm a parent that's been separated from my child as well, so it's devastating. Thank you so much for sharing your story and coming on here, and I know just a lot of this information is going to help a lot of other people too. So I
I
want to
hope
thank
so.
you very much, and you're in our prayers and thoughts, and together maybe we can unite more and make this change actually happen. And it's just
We're
better.
going to.
It's better
We're
for
going.
parents, for kids. It's for society in a whole.
Yes. Amen.
Okay. All right. Well, we will be talking to you again soon, I'm sure.
All right. Thank you, Tom.
Okay. Thank you. You take care.
You too.
Thanks for watching the Flying Monkey podcast. Like, follow, and subscribe to our social media sites on Facebook, X, YouTube, Rumble, TikTok, and Truth Social. You can also go straight to our webpage at www.flyingmonkeypodcast.com.
Winter, spring, summer, or fall, too hot or too cold, give us a call. We're always here to service your needs. We treat you like family at Mountain Breeze. Heating and air conditioning, set your mind at ease with Mountain Breeze. Mountain Breeze, heating and air